Hi, Ian. Thank you
Hi,
for
Rachel.
joining us on Black Ink Cinema's podcast. You are a producer, director. You co-founded Pulse Films and also BAFTA nominated for McQueen documentary, which was amazing. For those people who do not know who you are, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you want to do the McQueen documentary.
Wow. Ian BONEHÔTE, born and raised in Switzerland, Geneva, and French mother, but from the south of France, Catalan, and got Jewish or Polish from my grandmother, quite of a melting pot of a bit of everywhere. Came to the UK 22 years ago now, started studying, got kicked out of film school, then sort of really wanted to work into the short form because I felt that would be the best way to get my craft going. Yeah. So I was doing club visual, so I did a lot. Luckily, I had started to do club visual in Switzerland. I was working a lot in gay clubs at the time, house stuff, but I had a crew Sub 6, which is a great drum and bass crew with a lot of MCs. They came from a hip hop scene and stuff, and I was projecting images, and they had a night in London at the Blue Note. I don't know if you remember the Blue Note, or even heard it. That was the place to be in Hoxton back in the days when there was nothing. Okay. And I met some a visual crew in the UK, and they were doing Swage, which was an Asian beat night. They were doing Metalheads with Goldie and stuff, and all the great drum and bass DJ. And I kind of slime myself and stuck with them when I moved to London, and like showed up on the studio and said, can I work with you? And we got on very well, and I started. And then we started to do music video. I did my first music video was for a sort of hip hop duo with a singer called Alison David. Okay. And then I did a lot as I was doing we had a residency at a night called Scratch, which was a hip hop night in the Scala, and that is literally, I don't even think that Wiley had started to think about being the godfather. I love
hip hop, so that I'm sure that would have been so cool.
It was really cool at the time. And well, you know what was really cool is that hip hop wasn't working in the UK, but there was still a really cool UK scene. Yeah. And the UK scene was really unpretentious. There was people like Blaze, MC Estelle, before she kind of became a bit like poppy. She was a really cool MC and really streets. I mean, we had Mary J. Blige coming at the show. Wow. Eminem. It was a big night, Scratch. Yeah. Maybe one day I would like to make a documentary about that amazing, scene. And then started Pulse Film, and with literally living room with my business partner at the time, Thomas Bensky. I
love Pulse Films. They've made some really great, series and films.
Yeah, Pulse Film is great. I kind of grew apart, potentially creatively. I wasn't really part of the management after a while, and I wanted to do a film. I did a first film with my actual business partner and co-producer, Jill Ryder, which was called Alley Cats. Okay. We sort of Dee was producing as well short films at the time. She produced Adam Houghton's film Get Some, which was a great little horror film at the time. Anyway, we were starting to do loads of little things, and so I kind of stepped out. Very luckily, Pulse sold to Vice Media, so I was able to get some money and go off and start my own thing. And out of that, we had done the first film, Alley Cats, and we produced McQueen out of that, and another film called A Viking Destiny, and it's like a Viking film. Cool. But it was really interesting as producer because we produced that as well as we did McQueen, and one was really much about trying to create with a low budget. I think we had $1.8 million. No, actually we had a bit more, $2 million something. And we had loads of fighting sequence where McQueen was very much about the emotion and et cetera. And why did it get me to want to make... Sorry?
It's a great documentary.
Thank you. What attracted to McQueen is literally, I moved to London in 97, and 97 McQueen was boom.
Booming, yeah.
Booming. And literally, at the time, social media didn't exist. The internet didn't really exist. It's just starting up. We were all having our first email addresses, etc. And magazines was everything. And the UK had this amazing culture of counterculture magazine, if you want. You would have the boring Vogue. I keep on saying boring Vogue, and they've been kind of nice with on McQueen, but for me it was boring Vogue. I insulted them in Paris saying I never read Vogue. I will never read Vogue. Anyway, always a big admirer, and I was doing my short form career. I did quite a lot of things in fashion, and literally the project came out from a brainstorm with our co-producer, which came out of a distributor, and they were like, "Oh, what cool! Great Britain hasn't had like a proper movie doc lately, which would be great." And they said, "McQueen." And they called me up, and then we jumped on the bandwagon with D, and we kind of came up with the concept and stuff. But at the beginning of coming up with the concept was trying to tell the story through the shows. We had no money at the time, no access to anyone, no contact with the family or anybody else. So we started from scratch. And they got a sales agent involved, that other company called Salon Pictures. So it was Misfits and Salon Pictures.
Yes.
Misfits being us now. And we took it to Berlin in 2017, if I don't say something stupid. And they sold, managed to raise $1 million straight away in 3-4 days, because there was a demand for it. The time had been long enough, 7-8 years after his sad passing, his death, and maybe not too long that still he was fresh in people's memory as an audience and stuff. So I think it was a bit of a chance encounter in a way, but I'm a big McQueen fan. I mean, McQueen broke many taboos.
Yes.
And if we talk about Black culture, he's been using amazing, Black models very early on.
Yeah.
And not only, because Naomi Campbell became like the great one, but he worked with a lot of people across the board, and he worked with people with disability, which is something that actually is very much connected to what I'm doing now, because we're making another documentary about the Paralympic movement. Wanted to do something completely different. He's just really groundbreaking in his work and his approach, and I like the fact that he didn't give a fuck. I tend to not give a fuck. I think he had a bit of a darkness that I don't have personally, which took a toll on us to harness for the film, because we had to dig deep within it. But he's a genius. It's an understatement. And, the thing that really impressed me is that the UK is not a fashion capital originally. There's only one haute couture brand in the UK, and there will only be one for the rest of his story. It's Alexander McQueen. Yeah. That's it. Go ahead, sorry.
So, and I was just saying, I think for me, what's really why I can relate is because I grew up in and around Stratford. So to kind of see, I know where he's from, and to go to Rokeby and that and to know his background, and then to become this international superstar and kind of really break down barriers and smash ceilings is so inspiring. Honestly, it's and it's hard to watch when you see the dark side and things that he's battling and all of that. It's kind of difficult. But I think that came through in the documentary.
Thank you. The great thing as well, I think, if I'm going to keep on expanding, and you stop me if I'm going off.
Oh, no, knock yourself out. It's fine.
What I found really interesting was the 90s in the UK. The 90s in the UK was a sort of finally working class, people from a working class background, and women were starting to be recognized.
Yeah.
Then I feel that the 2000s, the noughties, was a bit of a weird middle ground year when a lot of the Black culture of the UK started to sell a lot more. Because I'm talking about, a lot of, my perception of it, that the Black culture has come from, an immigrant background, obviously. So it's the typical layers of some of the cities in the UK, the Liverpool, the Birmingham, and the London, obviously. And that sort of, I would say the 80s was probably for the working class, like a sort of bubbling underneath.
Yeah.
And then the 90s exploded. John Galliano was working class. A lot of the YBA, the Young British Artists, are from a working class background, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the music and actually the visual art and more of even the fine arts in 2000 were bubbling within the Black culture, which is this other side of immigration, because a lot of the working class immigration working class in the UK are not 100% British or anything like this. They might have been Italian background, Russian background, Spanish, Jews, whatever is that melting pot. And I think now, 2000 and hopefully more 2010 and onwards, that's where we start seeing a few rising stars and people really making it big. Because when Adam asked me to talk and stuff, I was thinking get my facts together and all the rest of it. And it's because we've come up with a concept which is not sold yet. I shouldn't talk too much about it, but it's basically called 97. I've talked too much already. And it's basically taking the year 97 in the UK and look how things have come to make 97 and what 97 created. And there was a massive things because, you know, Wiley's first step, you know, the first sound, you know, from two steps and garage moving to grime and all of that was that late 90s, early 2000s. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's so interesting that you say that. And because 97 is one of my favorite musical years. Like, I think there's some of the best R&B hip hop music that you'll like literally ever hear. And so that's a memory. That year I remember very clearly. There's a few other years that kind of merge into one, but that year seems to just really stay in your head with the events that happened in 97.
And UK or US or overall, would you say?
UK. And like you said, like, you know, British music was really, or Black British music, should I say, was really making grounds and growing in the UK. I mean, now it's like normal. People think like, you know, it's always been like this. And it literally hasn't. You know, there were pirate stations that we had
stations. And then basically, in a way that I remember people I adore, like Trixie and the Ronnie Size and stuff, or Goldie. They were within that sort of fringe of the dance stuff when it exploded, sort of core, what you said, two-step garage, that came from really, you know, a West Indie culture, I would say. Again, you know, it's just from an observer point of view, really come out there.
What else are you working on that you can talk about?
One thing we can talk about easily is a film called Rising Phoenix, and basically it's the history of the Paralympic, the event for people with an impairment. The word that we tend to use is disabled people, but after working almost 2 years on it, is a word I try to not use anymore, because disabled means something that doesn't work. And I can tell you everything works. Not everything works, but what works really well. We tend, in our general society, we tend to try to have names for things.
Yeah,
I cannot bear names. We cannot generalize. Yeah. We've chosen around 8-9 athletes, and we tell the whole story. And the story is very interesting because it's we try not to tell it like it started then and he gets, but we tell the story by starting in London and finishing in Rio, and doing loads of juxtapositions and looking back at the story of the movement. And the story of the movement was founded by a Jewish doctor that escaped Nazi Germany and that was actually accepted in the UK. And he got started in Stoke Mandeville, which is an hospital northwest, and he got given a spinal cord injury unit. So a lot of soldiers that came from the Second World War were being left to die, because if they had the severed back, they would just pump them up with morphine and they would have no interest because they couldn't fight anymore. And he basically found a treatment where he would avoid bed sores and other organ failures, and he started the things, and people starting to survive. And after the people starting to survive, they started to actually create a way to, to find something for them to do, basically. And he started to introduce them to sport, and the sport movement grew. And that was 1948 when he started the first game. And, 2012 was an amazing event. And then 2016 in Brazil was almost did not happen because people were stealing money from the movement, etc. So we tell that story looking back through the story of athletes. And because it's such a global movement, we go from South Africa to China, Japan, Australia, the UK, the US. We feature a lot of athletes from Latino backgrounds as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. And when will we be able to watch this?
That is a Netflix original, and it's out the 25th or the 26th of August. They're about to release the trailer. We just saw a draft, which needs
Fantastic.
Some work.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, it should be all announced within the next week or so, basically.
Great. And so just so people can keep up to date with you, you want to share with us your social media handles?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is always the best. I'm not the best at social media. I'm one of the old guys.
I know, it's right. Sorry, you and I both.
It's Ian BONEHôTE.
So since this is Black Ink Cinema podcast, we asked you to pick a film a Black film that you would like to discuss, and you picked
Glory.
Classic Glory, directed by Edward Zwick, starring an ensemble of an amazing cast, Morgan Freeman, Denzel Washington. Why did you pick this classic Civil War film?
I picked it because basically there's lots of other films I could have chosen. And I think Adam and I share a passion for Spike Lee. I mean, I remember he got his first BAFTA and his first Oscar the year we were nominated for McQueen.
Yeah.
And I am so arrogant and pretend. No, I'm not arrogant, but I don't get starstruck except him. So I had to have my little selfies, and it's one of my.
Of course. We've all been there. It's okay.
Yeah, and he loves it. That's what is great.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he loves it. No. He did it. There was a lot of people. Anyway, but my point is, I thought that Glory really, when I first watched Glory is a very good emotional film. About mainly Black protagonist. But why I wanted to pick up the film is because Matthew Broderick, I don't want to say something wrong. Yeah, Matthew Broderick becomes the hero.
Yeah.
And I think it's what I wanted to raise as an issue more than actually, it's not a Black film because it's been treated through the prism of a white society. Yeah.
You're following the narrative of Matthew and his character.
And then, it's really interesting. Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah. I'm just saying, and the Black characters are secondary in that.
Which is typical from a 1989 film. And it's typical from like that 90 things. And I think it's very interesting to talk about it because it is a great film and it is about a great subject matter, and it's about celebrating a regiment of mainly African-American soldiers, which happened during the Secession War between 1860 and 1865 within the context of slavery. So all those elements, I got really obsessed when I was a young boy in Switzerland with Black culture. I'm not going to hide. I'm the typical white boy that got literally in that 80s that completely got fallen in love with the hip hop, fallen in love with basket. I don't know what happened. I think the Americans were very clever to do a very big push without us realizing it in the 80s. I mean, watching Last Dance now, I still have 5 pair of Jordans that I've collected one from I was young. I had posters of Jordan everywhere. I played basketball. I played more basketball than football.
Yeah.
I went to doing camps. I'm a terrible singer, so I never really touched the music, but, I went tagging at the time, and I'm from Switzerland.
You've got to do what you love. It's fine.
You got to do what you love, and that's one of the great things in Switzerland. There's a lot of people say when you meet people from Switzerland that have taken the passion in terms of music. There's great jazz musicians in Switzerland. One of the greatest jazz festival, Montreux, has greeted artists from like 70, 60 years now. I think they're on their 70 years. Really few festivals are celebrating music like they have, as well as hip hop. We embraced hip hop even before the UK embraced hip hop in Switzerland. We had great producers. We had a great crew of beatboxers, great crew of anything. Anyway, but no, I think it's as well, it's a reaction. For me, I guess in the UK in the 70s, people took on punk.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted big baggy trousers and and I think, I don't know, I think it was a counterculture meet a way to express, and something that I felt cool, and I hated rock music. I started to love rock.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. I think everything that I could see around me, Geneva has got it's very international, and you've got people from everywhere. And it's very interesting because compared to other places, you might have people from everywhere, but wealthy. I remember being at school, and two of my friends were from, their parents were ambassadors from an African country, so they were at school with us, but they were from a very wealthy background and probably not having the same experience of being potentially from Africa that if they had been, their parents had come as an immigrant.
Yes, of course.
So that's a bit more Switzerland for me. Do you see what I mean? It's just a bit weird, and we tend to not have social class in Switzerland. that I was shocked when I came to the UK. Anyway, I've deferred again.
No, it's fine. It's interesting. It's really interesting. It all plays a part in how you perceive what you see and how you consume it. So, yeah.
And for me, then basically when I was young, I was obsessed by 1860, 1865. I was obsessed by the tunique bleu and les tuniques grises. That's how we call them in French. It's the blues and the grey. And I was obsessed with from a very young age. I have two bugbears. I never understood slavery, and I never understood people who didn't understand LGBTQI. I was 11 years old when Glory came out. So, and I remember watching it in the cinemas. I think I watched it, I was 12. And my mom and I wasn't raised with a dad. I didn't have a dad. My dad passed away really young, so I was very close to my mom. So we would go to the cinema a lot together. And my mom brought me to see things that now normally you would say, oh, it's not the right age and stuff. She would bring me to see. I've seen loads of film that maybe wasn't completely, but it was always. And I remember seeing the film and completely falling in love with all the characters, Freeman and Denzel Washington. And what I found fascinating is at the time they were tiny young actor. Not Morgan Freeman, he was already a semi-established actor, but a bit older. But Denzel Washington was at the beginning of his career, and now when you see,
and he won the Oscar for that as well.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the first Oscar for an African American. So I just all those things, but Edward Zwick doing it, the fact that Matthew Broderick was the main character, right? Later on in my career, I've always looked at this film and I wish that, if it had been done by Steve McQueen, it'd be a very different film. If it had been done by anyone, it would have been a different film for sure. But basically, the director, I think is less of an issue, but the producer and the angle and the financier and finding the
story, the narrative of it.
The narrative of it and finding the audience you want to talk to would have been very different now from back then. So I think it's a film that would be amazing to be remade.
I was going to ask you this later, but since we're on the topic, if you had the opportunity to retell the story, how would you and who would you cast? Because I think I was thinking about this as well when watching it. There were so many cringy moments or a few white savior moments. There was a few moments where I get it, where the story's told from Matthew Broderick's point of view because it's the letters. However, again, it's taken away from the 54th Regiment that broke glass ceilings and stood up and really represented men at a time that even the Bluecoats didn't want them to fight. So it was very confusing. And of course,
I think that's another detail I liked is the fact that at least in the film they showed that because this part of American history is being painted against like the Bluecoat were good. They were not good. Nobody was good.
And this is it. And it's like you don't even, you're fighting for their so-called freedom, but you don't even want them to be free enough to fight for themselves. It was just a whole contradictory, but it was a truthness, it was truthfulness because that's how it is. People consider themselves liberals, but then they have very bigoted mindsets.
But the liberal term is a very dangerous term because I think a lot of people consider themselves liberal right now.
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah, and they're very far from it. So just go back on the point. If you were to tell the story, because I think we probably found a few things the same that were like this could be remade.
There's so many stories to tell. I mean, I follow a lot of, again, it's my slight obsession, I follow the Museum of Freedom Washington, the Slavery Museum and NCC and a lot of, let me just see. Basically, there's a lot of stories that I keep on seeing, and this story is being told, but there's a lot of stories. The first African-American lawyer in 18. There's a lot of other stories, more than just this one that I would tell.
Okay.
And I would actually, many stories I would tell in the US, I think should be from an intellectual point of view. Do you see what I mean? Instead of just like fighting for freedom, I think it's... I just saw, not just see it, what's the title again, with the Black Panther actor. And
Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah. Is it Just Mercy? Yeah. And again, Just Mercy was a great one, but there's a lot of great individual within the culture, which would be really interesting to look into. I think I would tell it from the character of Denzel Washington, because for me, he's got that anger that really, some of the other characters kind of try to fit in, where he's angry, and rightly so. You know what's really fascinating? A huge amount of African American have been in the US for 250 years.
Yeah.
America is huge amount of the WASP or the white immigration is more late 19th century and early 20th century. So a lot of the African American are more Americans and will always be more American than any American afterwards. Yeah. And I just find fascinating when people are trying to think who was there first. Anyway, I'd like to tell a story about South Africa, actually. I find South Africa fascinating, and I find that we tend to forget a little bit about apartheid as well. Do you see what I mean? There's been a little bit of
I don't even think it's about forgetting. I think the problem with the world or people of today, anytime you start talking about trauma or that's happened, especially most recent, what happened with apartheid, people pretend like that was such a long time ago, and it really wasn't. Like, I literally remember it, and it was a thing.
Think about Rachel. People still make film about the Holocaust.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. And that was,
and that was 70 years ago.
I think because of the apartheid it's so close, and people are still reeling from that pain and suffering from that. And there's still a lot going on. I think the wound is still open.
And I think the problem again is, like, financially within the movie business, we are still led by the US.
Exactly.
The US, I don't want to sound insulting, but you would have a lot of the audience in the US have no clue where South Africa is. Do you see what I mean? No interest of South Africa. Yeah, I mean, again, the thing with Glory, which I thought I'm a bit of a sucker for. I'm a bit of a sucker for honor. I think that sometimes, maybe I was this little boy when I'm still a little boy. So I love those emotions, and I love those big moments where there is a savior thing. It's a white savior in this one, but there is a sense of savior. There is a sense of camaraderie. There is a sense of coming together. So when I was young and I was watching it, that was really giving me hope. Do you see what I mean? It was just
I totally agree. And I think one way to kind of combat, I was talking with Adam earlier about how better to tell a story is through the soldiers' eyes and the soldiers' story, where they've come from, because they were made up of different, whether just, being released as slaves, or, some of them were kind of, not on the plantation anymore. You have Denzel's character who was a runaway, and he's got this really strong presence and anger that you feel, but it's warranted, and you get it. And I just kind of feel like at the beginning, I was like, we could have got rid of at least 20 minutes because it was a little bit like, I don't know, it was just a bit pandering, and there was background music that was just a bit unnecessary. You just didn't quite know where this was going. And I think from the tent scene, when the black soldiers are kind of introduced to each other, you see Morgan Freeman, Denzel, then you're like, okay, you get the kind of the sense of, we're in this together. We're completely different, but we're kind of in this together. We've all got points to prove. And I think that was when the film kind of picked up. I think if it was made today, I'm not a big fan of remakes. I just think there's more stories to be told, like you said. However, if that was the case, we did say Denzel could still play an older person, because that's how good he is.
Completely.
But the likes of Daniel Kaluuya and Damson Idris would be really good to cast in this as well. I think they'll be able to portray those emotions and vulnerability that we need from these sort of characters.
I think what is great right now, you would have a much bigger pool of talent to look for.
So much. Yeah. And earlier you mentioned Michael B. Jordan with Just Mercy, and he has said that his character for Black Panther, Killmonger, was based on Denzel Washington's character in Glory. He kind of drew in from that, and I can completely see the connection of this, angry black man from how he's been treated in history and whatnot, and him acting out to try to reclaim some power back. So which I thought was a really nice connection.
Yeah,
The
I mean, he's a great. I've really liked Just Messi. I think obviously, they're both great, but I really liked the film, and I started to read a lot about the
lawyer,
the lawyer, because I thought he was such an interesting character. Jamie Foxx always steals the frame.
He's so talented.
He's so talented.
Yeah.
He's just, but again, he's so talented, but is he Brad Pitt in terms of like the stature he commands in Hollywood? Is he Leonardo DiCaprio? No. Is he a better actor? Yes. Do you see what I mean? And it's,
Ian. Ian. These are the $1 million questions. But I definitely, what I like about Just Mercy, and I know we're going off target here, but it's not, like, as a Black person, I'm a little bit overseeing slavery films because they're just trauma, like porn trauma, and it's like, okay, this happened, but there's so many, like you said as well, there's so many other stories that can be told. And even though for me, that's a modern day slavery story, the Just Mercy story, that is, but it's also it's created to enslave Black people. And so, but then you have this Black lawyer who's young and doesn't really have to do what he's doing, but, through passion and love and just care for humanity, perseveres, and he's still alive to tell this story. So for me to see that was just like,
he's still working.
Yeah.
He's still working. When they said, how many people he took out from the 200? Yeah,
it's something crazy like that, and it goes to show what you can do as one person, because we always feel a bit like, what can I do? Like, I'm just one person, but he's evidence that you can.
Yeah. And the same thing with, I think potentially the time of glory, to see those soldiers walking through towns and cities must have inspired a lot of young kids back in the mid of the 19th century, instigate pride instead of always being shut on. And I think that's what is really important, is that every level people have to try to inspire other people, because that's how we move forward as a society. Do you see what I mean?
There is a scene in the film when they're walking by and there's a bunch of little kids, and I think he leans over to say something to one of them, and their faces are just beaming with excitement and just so happy to be like, whoa, they're wearing uniform and they look like stand-up guys. So it's just that vision that sometimes can make the change. You don't even have to say anything. It's just visually the impact that can make. But going back to the film, do you have any favorite scenes that stood out to you?
Because I've admitted I haven't managed to rewatch it recently, but the really strong scenes that I kind of remember, I think I will go for the final battle when a lot of them fall. If I remember well, when all of them die.
That was quite moving. The music was great as well in that.
Yeah, but again, as you said, it's very 80s and 90s. It's very it's very quite over the top. Shoes. I think I remember someone picks up the flag, one gets killed, and someone picks up the flag.
Yeah, Denzel picks it up at the end as well. Yeah, that's one of my favourites. I did think the whipping scene with the one here, Denzel, was quite moving. And up until that point, I wasn't as emotionally connected to the movie. But when that scene happened, I was like, oh my God, I was fighting back the tears. And you could see he was fighting back the tears. And there was just this this emotional battle going on. And also when the soldiers are sitting around the campfire and they're having like a whole gospel sermon session and just talking about their feelings, I felt like that was such a Black scene. Like, I don't know if they got someone on board to kind of say, this is what would probably most happen, is that even in the face of like danger and the inevitable of them probably dying tomorrow, they're singing and just talking about what they're grateful for, which is a spirit that I definitely can recognize.
Yeah. And I think the change that they've worked in the Matthew Broderick character and how he comes to see things in a different way, despite it's still, I think I remember it as a strong thing, which I kind of like. You saw the journey of a character.
Yeah, he had a full arc development. Yeah. I did feel like the end ended a little bit abrupt. Like it was like this, the whole film was building up to this battle, and I think it's either maybe
where does the movement really go? Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and then it's just a few words at the end to explain what happened afterwards and how that affected it. I kind of wish they'd carried on a bit more and built up on the back end of the movie rather than the beginning, for me.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I almost said like to know more about the future, what happened afterwards, etc., etc. I mean, it just feel again. I feel that the film was so much tailored for an audience at the time that would be a completely different audience. They will be thinking about it completely. Do you see what I mean? I mean,
yeah.
The film industry is a funny industry.
Yeah,
because it has got a lot of good stuff in it.
Yeah.
But it takes so much time for things to happen. It feels that even if the wheels are in motion, they're going to really get somewhere 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. If that makes sense.
No, I hear that. And then it sometimes all happens at once and you're like, oh, there's a movement happening, but it's actually been in the works for a minute. The director, Ed Zwick, he's done a few other epic movies, Blood Diamond, The Last Samurai. What do you think he gets right about this film, about Glory?
I mean, for me, the fact that the film came out
at
the time, to tell you the truth, the film that, I don't even know all of the story, there's not been books or I couldn't find anything. The fact that this film, I always wonder if a film like this took 10 years to be made or actually was made quickly, or 20 years to be made. Do you see what I mean? I wonder if there was drafts where actually the soldier had a bigger role.
Well, apparently Matthew Broderick's character had more of a bigger role. And then after some consideration and they had a few people come on board, they decided to cut some of his scenes out and leave more of the soldiers in to kind of build up their characters and give it more of that feel, because I think it just kind of felt a bit like we were saying, white savior complex and stuff like that, and telling it from their point of view, whereas actually we want to know who these soldiers were. That's the whole point of the film. And of course he sacrificed his life and led these men into battle, and he should be honored in that way 100%. So it's kind of trying to find that balance. Yeah, exactly.
But they all sacrificed their lives too.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they've sacrificed their lives, and so you have to show their story. Yeah, as well.
But that's quite good you read that, because I was wondering if it was one way or the other, and that I think is a good way. But again, it's just I don't know how long you've got left, and I should maybe go and look after my family.
No, I'll keep I'll rein it in.
One of the problem of the lack of diversity of our industry is, I always found, is just how costly it is to sustain yourself in this industry.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? How costly it is to make film, how costly it is to live, for instance, let's say you're in London or New York or Los Angeles. Yeah. So the fact that, can you count financially on your family to help you out to potentially do some running for people or do an internship and stuff like this? And again, it comes from a privileged background, and I see the film industry less. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think the main issue is that it's a money-driven industry. You need to have money to sustain yourself. So whoever can sustain themselves 1, 2, 3 years, you might go to film school for 2, 3 years, and you'll need another 2, 3 years easily before you're in a position where you make a decent amount of money.
Exactly.
And if you're from a more humble background, potentially your mom and dad said, get a proper job. Yeah. And I wouldn't blame them, because I got told get a proper job.
I'm exactly the same. I didn't get into telly until a bit later, because I couldn't afford to get into telly until a bit later, because you can't just be not working and contributing and paying for yourself. I don't have rich parents to kind of fall back on, or I come from a single parent household. So I felt bad if I was to not be contributing or helping my parent in any way, coming from a big family. So it is a social economic problem, and this is something that we were talking about even where I work currently. We're based in Stratford, but there's barely anyone from Newham who works there. And then it's just like, or even the neighbouring boroughs or Redbridge. And so it's like, what are you guys doing to help these kids who are looking at this company and thinking, oh, I have no idea how to get there. and you guys are all coming from West London, South West London, or whatever, and taking up this space and not even considering the environment that you're in. And it's all about having someone in there to kind of open the door, give them the opportunity so that those barriers can be broken down. It's not that they can't do it. The opportunity is just not there because everyone, you know how telly is. It's kind of like everyone brings in their friends. And if you're from a particular area and a particular circle, that's all you're going to keep bringing in. And so there's this discussion going on right now of how to genuinely, authentically diversify, not just to tick a box, but to ingrain it in your company and your business without it feeling like a chore.
And it's very difficult because we've been looking at it while making the film for people with an impairment. Again, you know, someone with a wheelchair, especially within a pandemic situation, which might have trouble to come to your office. If you work remotely, no more excuses. I'm quite an anarchist, and an anarchist doesn't mean you want to destroy everything. You put in doubt the establishment constantly. You just constantly look at the political movement and you don't live as a status quo. You don't take because someone has been voted in everything they say for granted. You know, one thing is I think the youth need to go out voting. They need to their voice. They need to talk, and we need to be more vocal. I think we tend to be absorbed by materialistic things and be busy with life and stuff like this. And sometimes we should just forget a bit about that, use our brain and try. It will probably benefit everyone in the long run if everyone was more involved in trying to sort things out.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree. So for those people who haven't watched Glory or haven't watched it in a while, is there a particular scene that you would direct them to YouTube and say, just to give them a little teaser about Glory to entice them to watch the rest of the film?
Wow. You should have told me those.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
No, yeah. I think I've blablated enough that they'd be interesting thing to use anyway. For me, it's actually the all falling as men at the end. The fact that in front of death we're all equal, and if you fight for one thing, it's a little bit over the top. I totally agree, but I still remember that's what marked me the most. I totally, you mentioned the flagellation one, and you mentioned the singing together. I remember as well the scene when they first meet. But I think the end for me is just this idea of trying to lose you. People were not going to get the freedom out of this fight, but they were representing something that was already a massive change. Yeah. And I think they were ready to die for it because almost they had nothing to lose. And I found that fascinating because I think very quickly in our society now we feel we've got so much to lose. You've got mortgage to pay or your salary, or you don't want to say too much, the story of Colin Kaepernick, taking a stand, he never played again as a football player, despite being an extremely talented football player. But because he took this stand, suddenly he became, an icon, and probably on the long run on his life, he lost his sporting career, but he became something bigger. Sorry, I make another things, but I think those guys, what they've done, we've made a movie, this movie come out of Glory, and I think it's this fact of doing something much bigger than yourself. And just accepting to die for it. I don't know. I think that's very inspiring, and that's not only connected to background or skin color. Do you see what I mean? It's a very human thing. And it's a very inspiring thing. And it's beyond culture. Sorry.
No. I totally agree with you. Another scene that does come to mind, doesn't have a lot of action, but when Denzel's character is speaking to Matthew's character by the water, and he talks about, I think, carrying the flag. They're having a conversation about carrying the flag, and he's like, I'm not going to carry the flag. And obviously we kind of understand why, because the flag doesn't represent him. But he goes on to say, after this war, you're going to go back to your life, and you're going to go back to your house.
Privilege.
What am I going after this? And I think that poses the most important question about the now and then what happens going forward. And it's kind of like everyone's just, okay, we just want to win this war, but actually not thinking about the bigger picture. Are we still going to be equal in this? And I just thought that was such a poignant discussion that they had that can go over your head amongst the war and amongst the action that goes on. But actually, that is the most important question of the film for me. And I thought it was an important scene that they both had.
Yeah, and and then after the fact that he picks up the flag.
Yes.
And then the Matthew Broderick character dies, so he doesn't go back to his life because actually, you know, he makes the one of the ultimate sacrifice. Yeah, no, I agree. So it's probably that scene set up the ending in a very powerful way.
Exactly, because it showed that he was, you know, he didn't want to, but he still went and picked it up. Yeah. Ian, I know you've got to get back to your kids, so I don't want to take too much of your time.
But it was really
about this forever.
Really interesting. And I got asked the other day for woman or man, a black documentary maker.
Okay.
And I was like, is it because it's a question, and I'm on a mission to find a few young talent out there, but in the doc space, but there's not so many people coming through. So is it because of a lack of interest in that thing? Because it's actually a cheap thing to do in a way. Do you see what I mean?
I don't think it's a lack of interest. Like, I think it's a lack of access.
Where to start? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lack of access and understanding, and there's very far and few in between. And another point that I brought up with this whole thing that's going on is that a lot of my peers would have left the TV industry by the time they get to my age, because it is quite racist. And you just thinking, I can't be asked to be in this room of, they call it banter. It's not banter, you know. Even when you speak up, you'll get shunned, or your contract will be cut short because you spoke up. So it's kind of, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You either sit there in silence and take it, or you speak up and you're perceived as an angry black woman or an angry black boy, or being too black or not being black enough. Like, imagine someone white telling you you're not being black enough.
Yeah.
You know, these.
I mean, the coconut effect.
Yeah, and it's just like, honey, we're coming all creeds and all personalities. I don't know what you've been told, but yeah, just because I don't know, talk like a roadman doesn't mean I'm not black. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, but yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of interest, and it's funding, it's money.
Money. And that's the sad truth, because actually, doc, you can really just do it you can take 10 years. I'm not saying which one, and it's like, there's the big blockbuster ones, but you can just, contemplate for a year or two discreetly. You just accumulate the stuff. And I'm thinking about it. Adam and Rachel, keep thinking with me.
I will think with you. I'm
plug it in.
That, for sure.
No, literally plug it in.
I just want to say a huge, massive thank you for joining us. You've blessed us with your presence, and I really appreciate it. We've spoken beyond glory, and I hope once we're up and running that you can come and join us for one of our screenings. It will be great.
I will. No, definitely I will. And even if you do a screening, like, Zoom screening and stuff, let me know. I mean,
awesome.
I'm always juggling too much with two boys and homeschooling and the work and stuff, but I'd definitely love to. And again, keep you plugging on the floor. I'm looking for this woman or this man.
I'm here. Just give me a shout. I've got a lot of ideas, and I would love to share them.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Have a lovely evening. Adam?
You too.